In this episode, we're going to carry on with the Towns Bowie build-off. I think this is like part 4. Yeah, part 4. So we got the forging done, we got the grinding done. We're hand sanded to 150 grit. We got the D-guard fitted. All that's ready to go. So next step, we can go ahead and do the heat treat. One of the requirements of the build-off is that the heat treat needs to incorporate a hamon, which is basically just a differential hardening on, say, like a mono steel. And that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to use this stove cement to achieve that. We're going to mix up the slurry. We're going to reduce it down with some water, mix up a thin coat of slurry, put it over the entire blade, and then we're going to come back and do a thicker coat up in the thicker portions of the flats on the blade. So, and yeah, Sam Towns actually has a really good recent video on how to do hamon, so check that out. It's over on his channel. So I'm going to try to mimic something of the sort. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. This is a 1070 steel. I've already tested this steel, tried to oil harden it in the oil that I have, and it did not harden very well. It did water harden though, so what I'm thinking about doing is I'm going to go ahead and put the clay on, get all that set up, and then when I go to do my quench to harden the steel, I'm going to do a double quench. I'm going to go into water for a second or two, and then I'm going to go straight into preheated oil, and I'm going to try to heat the oil up pretty hot, probably up to around 250 degrees, 300 degrees, get it as thin as I can, and hopefully from there that won't cause any issues. So I'm just afraid with a full water harden it's going to crack, and I would rather try this first and then not harden and then normalize and have to do it all over again and then go straight to water, then just go straight to water and crack it. So this is what turns a flat pointy piece of metal into a knife. So this is kind of make or break for the blade. Yeah, straight water hardening kind of worries me a little bit, but that's why I'm going to do it in I'm going to do a 2-stage quench. So in the water, in the oil. So hopefully it works out. Hopefully I get a really nice hamon, and yeah, hopefully we got something we can show off and be proud of. So stay tuned, and we're going to get on to the heat treat. All right, so a little bit of a correction. I had the wrong tube. I'm going to use this fireplace mortar. That's good up to 2,000 degrees. So a little bit of a correction there. I grabbed the wrong tube out of the cabinet. All right, so this is going to be a really thin coat, so I want to make this kind of watery. And I'll add water or add mortar as I go until I get it to the consistency I want. This is just going to be like a, almost like a primer, I guess. Thin coat to help get everything to stick to it, versus just smearing on a really thick coat. Again, all this is outlined in Sam's video. If you look at his latest hamon video, I think he has an older video too, which I'm pretty sure I watched a while ago, but yeah, his new video is actually a really good one. So I recommend it. So I'm going to mix this, and when I get it to the consistency that I want, I will bring you back. All right, so I got this mixed up pretty good. I got it pretty runny, and using this sponge brush, and I'm going to apply a thin coat to the entire blade. I'm going to come down in here too, to the tang. I don't want no abrupt stops in the clay that might cause some stress. And this may take a couple coats because it's kind of streaking a little bit, but I'm pretty sure as it dries I'll be able to get a nice even coat of this mixture. Again, it's just the mortar repair 2000 degrees that I've reduced with water. I'm just getting a really thin coat. I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to reapply. Hey, let that dry, reapply. So I took the torch and I slightly heated the blade to help dry this slurry mix up. So I don't want to get this too thick, but I do want a nice base that the tempering clay, it's actually going to temper the thicker parts of the steel during the quench. I want to give it something good that it can stick to. So this is more than likely going to be an all-day process because this is going to have to dry, and it's going to have to dry, you know, all the way. I do have the smoker going, so after I get everything applied, I might just take it over to smoker, get it close to that. That runs around 250 degrees, and then just let it kind of cure from there. Alright, so we got this dry to the touch. I'm sure there's still moisture in there. I'm going to go ahead and start putting my thicker coat on. I just added some more mortar mix to what I already had going. So I guess what I'm going to try and do is pretty much stay on the flats. And I'm going to kind of apply this in thin coats. And I guess the key here is got to get it pretty much even on both sides, so when it hits the quench, it doesn't cool down at such a rapid rate in a weird area that it would actually pull the blade over and cause a warp. So this may still be a little bit on the thin side. I may add some more, but I'm kind of just staying on the flat there. I'm not going to clay too much on the spine because I don't want any curvature. This is a pretty thick blade. I don't think I would get any anyways, but you never know. So I'm just going to kind of try to stay away from the spine. And we're just going to hit the flats here. Having these big giant lumps in there, probably not the best thing, so I'm going to lightly just kind of smooth everything down. And if it thins out as I get down the edge, that's quite okay. Like I said, the important thing is trying to do the same thing on both sides. And I don't think I'm quite thick enough yet. I'm going to have to add a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and just put this coat on. And maybe as this
mixture dries out, I'll get the consistency I want, because it's going to start to dry in the container. I was leaving it covered up in a bag to prevent it from drying out, so I might just leave it to the room air, and it'll kind of dry out on its own. So I'm going to flip it around and do the other side. So I will bring you back when I get a couple of coats of this on. Alright, so I'm going to apply a second coat of the thicker mix. And I did take this out and put it on my propane grill with one burner running on low, which kind of brought the temperature of the grill up to about 250 degrees. And that's just air temperature. It's not surface temperature of my my metal here. So I'm going to apply another coat. I'm just going to keep doing this until I get the thickness I want. So it's actually the next day, and got the clay on the blade. I actually cured it 200 degrees and 210 degrees in the oven for quite a while yesterday. I let it dry overnight. The blade is actually in the oven right now. I have it preheating. I have the oven set up to 400 degrees. I want to kind of get the blade hot before I start the quench. Right now I got some steel in the forge, and we're going to preheat the oil right here, and I'm also going to preheat my water down here. So that's what I'm waiting on right now, is to get all this steel heated up so I can kind of warm up all my quenching, and yeah, I'll bring it back when we start getting the knife ready to quench. So hold on. preheated to 425 degrees already. So that clay is going to retain a lot of heat, so I'm going to keep it in this oil. I'm going to test it with a file. So in all honesty, that really doesn't sound that hard. Alright, so we're going to try again this time. Just going to put it in the water, and when I see the edge go dark, I'm going to pull it out, so see what happens. Alright, so it's actually working. Actually warping while she's cool. Third time's a charm. If it doesn't harden this time, then I'm just gonna call it quits. I'm not gonna have time to make a another knife. I gotta work all week in Quad State this weekend, so I'll figure something out later. Do something with the D-guard and all that good stuff. So, yeah, it is what it is. If it doesn't harden, it doesn't harden. I test hardened a piece of it, and it did harden with water. What exactly is going on right now, I don't know. So, could have been just a piece of mild steel, and I had a section of the steel that I tested that had just enough carbon in it to make it feel like it hardened, but using a much larger piece, you know. I mean, it seemed like it spark tested okay. I don't know. But it's taking a straight water quench. There's no tinging or pinging. Or the last time something did happen, because it actually did warp a little bit, and I thought the edge did feel harder, but it wasn't hard all the way down. So I took some normalization cycles. I straightened it out in the vise. So now I'm going to go ahead and let it cool down in the vise. Really don't like doing that, but there's nothing I can do at this point. I think if I take it straight into the house right now, it's just going to warp in the oven. So I'm going to let it cool down, and hopefully I come back and it'll at least somewhat skate a file. I mean, I'm not expecting it to be freaking like super hard, but you know, I need some sort of hardness there to call it a knife. You know, I don't expect it to be harder than a file, but I mean, the file just having no trouble at all cutting it. So there's like traces of skate. Like on one side of the blade, it felt like it was skating the file. I flipped the blade over, it wasn't. There's still some residual clay on the blade, so see what happens. Alright, so I guess I got good news and I got bad news. So the edge did harden. This file still bites a little bit, but the big difference from the Tang. So I guess that's worth continuing on with it. I guess we'll tell when it comes out of temper and I sand it, because if there's no differential in the coloring, then yeah, that's an obvious sign that nothing hardened. And that leads me to, I guess, the bad news. I'm sure there's going to be a Hamon here, but I have no idea what it's going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it jigged up. I threw it in this jig because the second time I quenched it in the water, it did warp. I ran 3 normalization cycles and I jigged it up in the vise, got it straight again. And I did get a little bit of a ripple right here on the edge. So something did happen with the changing of the metal. I don't work with 1070 that often, so I don't know how hard it's supposed to get. I'm used to like spring steel and stuff like that, and it gets like rock hard. So I don't. Maybe this is just a characteristic of what I would consider like a medium carbon steel. Maybe it just doesn't get that hard. So maybe that's the only thing that allows it to survive a water quench. I don't know. Something did happen. It could, in all possibility, it could have happened the first time, and I just not familiar with it. I'm just kind of pleased that the abuse I just put this thing through during the quench, 3 quenches in a row, that it didn't crack. So I'm gonna go ahead and get it in the oven and relieve any stress that might be in there, because if I keep letting it set, it probably will wind up cracking. But I'm going to shut up and get this in the oven and get this steel relaxed a little bit. I'm probably going to do at least 4 hours of tempering, so I'm going to relax this steel and kind of see where we're at. All right, so it's 2 weekends later, and in the last scene we were off to temper.
I did temper the knife at 375 degrees for about 4 hours. And because of the way the heat treat went, I really wasn't 100% sure what I had, so I went ahead and cleaned it up on the wire wheel and just kind of cleaned up whatever residual clay was left, any oxidations, and I did a quick etch on it just to see if there was any kind of differential hardening. Preliminary signs on that were pretty good. Coming out of the etchant, I could see a line in it and a difference in how fast the acid was eating the steel because of the difference in the hardnesses. And the second concern I had was how usable a knife would actually be. So at that point, I went ahead and just took it over the belt grinder, threw a worn out 120 grit belt on it, put an edge on the knife, ran it on the stone a little bit. I got it to where it would at least, pop hairs and shave a little bit, stropped it a little bit. And then I took it outside and did some chopping with it. I chopped 2 2x4s with it. I started to chop on some not dry cured, but seasoned maple that I burned for firewood. All that, no problem. No deformations in the edge, nothing like that. I did a brass roll test, no deformations there. Then I started to do some cutting tests, and I'm not going to say I was discouraged about that, but I think what I'm working here with is something that is pretty tough, but as far as the hardness goes, edge retention is probably a little bit on the weaker side. I cut leather with it, and the leather kind of had its way with it. You could strop it back, no problem, and keep working, but the leather did kind of have its way with it. And then I will switch to cardboard, and it actually cut quite a bit of cardboard before it just really didn't feel like it wanted to cut anymore. So as far as edge retention goes, I think it is decent. I'm not going to say it's good. You can work with it. It will cut cardboard. It will actually cut quite a bit of cardboard. And it just has to be one of those knives that you'll have to sharpen more frequently. But as far as toughness, this thing's actually pretty daggone tough. I did do a tip test on it. I jabbed the tip in a log, threw the blade over, and the tip slightly bent a little bit. It did not break off. It did not come back into shape. It did kind of bend slightly. So after reforming that, I continued with more testing. I did cut some wood. I seemed to cut wood pretty good. The wood didn't seem to bother it as much as the leather and the cardboard did. But that's kind of the intentions of those two tests, because cardboard will tear up any knife. It's just a matter of how long it's going to last. And if it was spring steel or 1095 or something a lot harder, it would have lasted a bit longer. But for what it is, I actually think it did pretty good. So after I was satisfied that I had something usable, I started to clean the blade up. I spent all of the week before last after work hand sanding. And at one point I realized that there was a ripple in the edge from the second heat treat, that I still had to get some of that out. And at that point I realized I had to go back to the belt sander. So about halfway through the hand sanding process, I took it back to the belt sander, and I ground it, not a lot thinner, but I ground it down a bit thinner, and it actually, I think, is going to be a better knife as a result of it, because it was pretty beefy. And so after I did all that, I went back and continued with the hand sanding. I took the hand sanding up to a 1500 grit, and that was all throughout the course of the week before last. So that was right after the weekend I did the heat treat. So by last weekend, it was a pretty nasty weekend. It would have been a good weekend for forging, but I really wanted to continue on with this. I spent all of the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, doing a series of etches and polishes, trying to bring the hamon out. Now in the first quench, I had the clay on there, and after that quench, the clay kind of broke off. And at that point, I made a decision not to reclay it, and I was just going to rely on the fact that if I go ahead and quench it in the water and pull it out before it's all the way cooled, the thicker metals is going to retain enough heat to keep the thicker parts of the knife sharper than the edge. And that's the way we went ahead and ran it. Yeah, so with this style of knife, in my opinion, I think the grind lines are more attractive than like what a Hamon would make the knife. I mean, I think Hamons look really nice on certain style blades, like either like a Scandi blade with a really short bevel, or like a flat grind with no bevels at all. Just, you know, I think the really defined Hamon line and the grind lines kind of conflict with each other in the appearance in the knife. Just my opinion, but Hamon is a requirement, and I think the Hamon part of this build is probably going to cost me points, because yeah, I mean, when it's something that Sam says has to be there, I think he means it has to be there. Like, you can't just reflect it in the light and say, oh yeah, it's there. But yeah, it's something that needs to be pronounced and say, oh yeah, okay. You know, without even a glance. But you know, through a series of etchants, I tried coffee first, which did good. When I first pulled it out, you know, you really see a huge difference. But after you cleaned it up and polished it, the coffee etch just wasn't deep enough to retain a really sharp contrast in the two different hardnesses. Then I went to ferric chloride. Ferric chloride did kind of the same thing, but I really don't like ferric chloride etches. I don't like the color it makes the steel. I just don't like it. Maybe it's my ferric chloride. It's time to change it out, but I really don't like the color that it makes the steel look. I mean, it's basically just gray. That being said, I still did the ferric chloride, and I did a series of polishes and etches, polishes, etches, polishes, etches. So basically you etch it, wash it, polish it, kind of see where you're at, put it back in, and just keep doing that until you get the finish you want. And it just still wasn't bringing out that line like I really wanted to see, or expecting Sam would want to see. So that's when I went to the lemon juice. That was actually something Sam recommended in his video, and I gave that a try. So I just kind of spent all day Sunday sitting at the kitchen table, rubbing it with lemon juice, washing it, and then polishing it with metal polish. Use a series of different, I actually tried a whole bunch of different oils. I did the clove oil, I tried lime oil, and those things kind of help a little bit too. But yeah, I think really the biggest thing that helped it was bringing that line out was the lemon, the lemon juice. So I kept doing that until I got the contrast that I wanted. I think I got a contrast that doesn't take away from the lines in the knife, but the Hamon is still there. Hindsight being, when I clayed it up, I probably should have left the edge of the knife bare steel. I did put an extremely thin coat of clay on it. Now, I don't think in my mind that was nearly enough clay to hold in any kind of heat to prevent it from heat treating all the way. But I think the clay on the spine was, I don't know. I don't know. It just, the first time I quenched it, everything looked, you know, good. It wasn't magnetic. I soaked it shortly, and when I went into the quench, I don't know if the clay just held in so much heat, it didn't harden or what, but when I quenched it the second time, after the clay busted off, I saw that you know, something did harden, because not only did the shape of the blade change because of the quench, but yeah, the color and the edge and the flats in the spine also, you know, were contrasted. because of the type of steel that I had, I was kind of expecting it to skate a file like spring steel would or 1095 would, something that get extremely hard. But seeing how this is a medium carbon steel, I just couldn't get that same effect. So in my mind, it didn't harden, but actually it hardened as hard as it could get with the amount of carbon that it had, in contrast to the file I was using to test it. So that kind of screwed me up a little bit. Maybe it did harden on the first quench with the clay. I don't know. It's possible, but probably a good excuse to get some of those scale files to kind of find out exactly where you are before you determine that something didn't harden. Probably not a bad idea to go ahead and look into getting some of those. But it's very rare that I use a different kind of steel than what I'm used to using. So that's one good thing about this build, is that it's kind of making me specifically come out of my shell and deal with a steel that I haven't really dealt with before. I've used this steel before. I've made tomahawks and stuff with it. I've used it as the body, and then I weld in like a spring steel bit. But to actually make a knife out of this steel, yeah, I've never done that before. So it's been a learning experience for me. I'm surprised this thing actually survived 3 water quenches, 2 partial water quenches and a full water quench. I'm surprised all I had was a warp on the second one and no cracks. So I did get the ripple that we had to come back and grind back out, but all in all, with 3 quenches, I'm actually surprised this blade's still sitting on the handle. So I'll go ahead and shut up. I took a bunch of pictures, kind of show off where we're at. I just wanted to kind of explain, what's been going on for the last 2 weeks. There would have been no effective, interesting way to film all that. It even be worth putting it on a video. But I just kind of thought that it was worth talking about, how it went, where we are, and where we're going to go. So next we're going to get on to the handle, and I have a piece of handle stock that Bobby Shield sent me out, and I'm going to be getting started on that this weekend. So I opted not to work on that throughout the week. Coming home from work, being tired, this, that, and the other. I told myself I'm going to wait for the weekend, and I'm going to wake up on Saturday morning fresh, start working on it, because if I try doing it when I get home from work, I'm going to try to be impatient, tired, and screw it up. And that's the only piece of, well, it's not the only piece of handle stock I got, but it is the piece of handle stock I want on this knife, and I don't want to mess it up. So with that, I'll let you guys go. This is going to be into part 4, and I'm going to get started on the handle today. So thanks again. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Just check me out on Instagram, Etsy, YouTube, Rumble. Remember to check out the townsbowiebuildoff hashtag. Type that in, it'll pop up everywhere that people are doing stuff. See what everybody else is doing. And yep, stay tuned for part 5.